Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Astrocartography Podcast. Today, we want to talk about the moon on the Midheaven. When we talk about moon on the Midheaven or moon on the MC line, we're talking about a life where the inner world becomes public, when the moon governs our emotional body, our needs, memories, instincts, and vulnerabilities. The Midheaven is the most visible point in the chart, our reputations and our role in the world. It's usually what we're known for. Jim Lewis, who created astrocartography, had a really simple way of describing this line. He said that on the moon MC line, your public needs you. And I love that phrasing because it immediately tells you what's happening here. Your emotional life, your sense of safety, and your visibility in the world all get braided together. People with this placement, or who move to the line, often become emotionally invested in their status. Not in a cold, hungry way, not in a power-hungry way anyways, but in a very human way. They want to belong. They want to be accepted. They want to be useful. And the need quietly shapes their career, their public image, and the roles that they step into. Don Bradley described the moon on the Midheaven as creating a deep sensitivity to public feelings and a strong need for social acceptance. There's often a pull towards helping professions, public service, food, housing, caregiving, and anything where you're responding to real human needs. Work feels personal here. Visibility feels personal. Both Lewis and Bradley point out something important, though. This placement brings attention, but it also brings vulnerability. You can be noticed by people in power, bosses, institutions, influential figures, and that attention can open doors. But at the same time, your emotional stability can start to depend on how others are responding to you. Approval matters. Feedback matters. And that can be both motivating and exhausting. There's also often a strong mother theme, either a deepening relationship with one's own mother or becoming a kind of emotional stand-in for others. And yes, underdogs tend to show up. People and animals who need care somehow find you. In this episode, we're going to ground all of this by looking in real examples. One famous person who was born with the moon on the Midheaven, and two well-known people who moved to their MC lines and saw their public lives shift in really telling ways. Because the moon on the Midheaven isn't just about success, it's about being emotionally visible. And once that happens, the public doesn't just watch you, they feel you.
All right, now let
All
me
right,
see.
so we wanted to move into, we found a really good example of an individual who was born with this on their in their natal chart, and that's Frida Kahlo.
Frida Kahlo has a really good example of this in her natal chart, right? And how it shows up, because that's how, so her moon MC line runs through Mexico, of course, then that's how it works, right? The place where you were born is going to hold, like if you have an angular planet, the place where you're born, that line is going to run through that place. And I do think it's interesting because she's so known as for her work, her artwork, and her just female persona in that place, right? And so it's such a just a kind of really good spot on example of how like sometimes like even after passing, right? Um, that personal line that she even posthumously, right? It still holds weight through Mexico, right? It still
Yeah,
holds like it is quite powerful, and energetic in that type of a way. Um, and yeah, so it's in Taurus, right? So it's an exalted moon. So it's well placed. And she was an artist, right? Which is very Taurian Venusian. Um, she came from an artist family, but then there's a lot of other things going on in her chart, right? That are quite difficult, right? So it is interesting because that moon uh is ruling over the ruler of her 12th house is that exalted moon, right? And that 12th house story that she has with that sun in opposition to Mars and that Mars Uranus conjunction, which like all of the health issues that she struggled with, the accident that she was in when she was young, right? And how that
yeah.
influenced her artwork.
Let me just walk
Yeah,
through some of her timeline because she was
definitely.
born July
Hmm.
6th, 1907, in Sonora, Mexico. She had a lifelong emotional and physical home base there. She didn't really move away. She had close sibling bonds. When she was 6 years old, she contracted polio. And so early on, she had trauma to the body, she had isolation, and she had an altered sense of self image. Um, so when she was between the ages of 3 and 13, during when she was living in Mexico, this was the Mexican Revolution. So there was a lot of like political awareness and instability during those formative years. And then when she was 15, she enrolls in the National Preparatory School. This is really rare for women. And she's got ambition beyond a domestic role. And when she was 18, she ended up getting into a horrible accident on a trolley. It was catastrophic and it was life-defining trauma at this point. And if I am correct, if I look at these notes, the accident happened in 1925. It was September 17th, and she was riding a bus home from school when it collided with a trolley. She was seriously injured in the accident with multiple fractures of the spine, the right leg, the collarbone, the ribs, and the pelvis. Her shoulder was dislocated, her right foot was crushed, and her abdomen and uterus punctured by an iron handrail. She later joked that this moment was when she lost her virginity. The injuries plagued Kahlo for the rest of her life, and she underwent more than 30 medical procedures in subsequent decades. What I find really fascinating about this story is when you've got the moon on an angular house, there's an emotional sensitivity, and having
Mhm.
it in the public eye tends to bring that to the surface. But when she was a child, she became kind of this caretaker for her father, who had epileptic seizures. And
Mhm.
he was also an influence on her, and he inspired her early awareness of composition and perspective because he was a photographer, a really
He was
well
also
known.
a well-known
Yeah,
artist,
he was
right?
really
So
well known
uh-huh.
for his, and Frida was part of his second family. He had been married before with
Mhm.
children from that relationship. So she had,
Right.
um,
Uh-huh.
yeah, she had half brothers and sisters, I believe.
So it's very much the art it's an inherited, right? So that visibility, right? That 10th house, that angularity being known for it, right? The 10th and the fourth having to do with the parents, right? The father or the mother's lineage. And it showing up there makes a lot of sense in that perspective as well, right?
Yeah, and caretaking
Um,
as like a job, your MC often
mhm,
not is just public, but it tends to relate to careers. So that was something, it was
mhm.
an early indicator within her chart for sure.
Yes.
So we can do, she had the bus accident at 18.
Mhm.
That puts her in a third house perfection year. No, wait,
Um,
13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, sixth.
oh, that
Interesting.
totally makes sense, right? It is interesting.
Uranus, Mars,
Uh-huh.
violence, and
I Yeah, I did wanna say also, let me pull up the map really quick. I just wanted to look at the Paran line that was there also.
so
Hold
it
on a second.
happened in Mexico City because she was
Mhm.
away at
Yeah,
sea.
it's kind of like it's on the outskirts of Mexico City, I
Yeah,
think,
yeah,
her
yeah.
birth location. It's nearby, and I pulled it up a minute ago, and, not sure if that was a little distracting, but she has a Pluto-Saturn, south of
Oh,
there
look at
with an
that.
orb,
What's
right?
the distance? What's our orb of influence here? How far away?
Oh, pretty dang close.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pluto on the descendant, Saturn on the IC. So yeah, it is kind of interesting that it's kind of a heavy story in that area for her. But that moon midhaven line is yeah, it's interesting. And once again, it's baked into her chart, right? It's the ruler of her 12th house. It is interesting that then when you look to where the ruler of that placement is, it's that Venus in the 11th house, which is in Gemini, which is conjunct Pluto, which she had a lot of like powerful friends and powerful people in and her husband, of course, was Diego Rivera, right? So you knew she was in these like groups and settings with people that were like
And
pretty
that's one of the
well off, right?
significations of that line, for
Right,
sure.
right. But even just in delineating the ruler of that line and in seeing it's in that 11th house.
So at 18 years old,
Mhm,
she was in this catastrophic bus trolley.
Mhm.
For about a year, she was on long bed rest and began painting. And this is where, she started to take what was, her inner life turned outward. It was like this activation point for her, which, the accident occurs and then she begins painting. And that's that sixth house perfection year at 18 years old.
Mhm.
You got the Uranus and Mars of action. Mars
It
is
is interesting.
is
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
happy in the sixth
Mhm.
house.
No,
But
it's
then
exalted in Capricorn too, right? It's
yeah,
like, so it's well placed. So it is interesting because there are a lot of like contradictions and like silver linings in her chart, right? She's got the sun, fairly conjunct Jupiter, not all the way. Jupiter exalted in Cancer, right? But
yeah,
then they're in opposition, right?
yeah.
Those placements are in opposition with each other. And then of course it's all in the 12th house stellium, but then you look to the ruler and the ruler is exalted, right? It's the
Mhm.
moon exalted. And it's conjunct amid the MC. So it is a very interesting chart in the sense that it's full of like both good and bad. You can see how she was well off. She was very well off, but then still struggled immensely with, her health and different things. And then even her image, right? It's clear. You look, the ruler of that Venus um, Pluto conjunction is Mercury in her first house of self, right? Which is interesting, right? Too, because she drew it was all like self portraits, right? That she did.
Mhm. Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so when you take the delineation a step further outside of the moon MC, you take it a step further, these networks of people, right? Which a lot of it was through her husband, right? The 11th house, through knowing the right people, and also her father, through having those connections, that
Yeah.
she became the artist. And then
Well,
what
and
did she
so
do? She drew
often the
herself.
influence,
Hmm.
I mean, you as an ancestral astrologer would know this better, but like that Mars placement, the men in your life
Hmm.
being in
Hmm.
the sixth house.
Yeah, and also being, yeah, it's got its joy there, but then there was a thing of service. And then also I think she was immensely heartbroken too with by having fertility issues, right? Which is another layer because it's a Cancer stellium in the 12th, right? So there is a lot of that pain there. And when you look to the ruler of the fifth, yes, it's a Sagittarius fifth house, and yes, it's an exalted Jupiter, but it's in the 12th house, right? So I think she
Right.
did suffer from a lot of miscarriages and different.
Yeah.
And then she also spent some time, I think, in New York City, just
Yeah,
at parties and
Detroit,
stuff
Detroit,
with
and then that's where, when she was 24, she had
mhm.
a miscarriage, and the loss of motherhood
Right.
becomes this artistic theme. You can see that,
Mhm.
and then yeah, and 26, 2 years later, she's in Detroit. So 22, no, 23, she's in San Francisco. 24, she's in Detroit.
Okay, so her chart is relatively the same, the relocated chart, as far as like using, based on the whole sign house system. It's going to remain relatively the same. She doesn't have a whole lot really going on in San Francisco that I can see that's too different
Yeah,
from
for
her
like
natal
parans or
story.
anything.
Or even for
Sometimes that's
Pran,
nice,
she's
man.
not
I
a
like living in spaces that don't have a lot of energy when
absolutely, absolutely. And then let's see, so Detroit, and yeah, what I think is interesting is that over here, where she likely would have been like partying with these people that were like big, well-known, famous artists and stuff over here in New York City, she's got that Venus and Pluto on the Midheaven over here, right? I think that's kind of super fascinating.
right, when you've
Um,
got that can really
mhm,
transform your public image,
right.
and bring you to fame. Uranus, Pluto on the MC.
I imagine she must have had a lot of art gallery shows there too, and imagining the people that were in the vicinity with her were probably very well known, aside from
Ah,
obviously her husband too. And that, yeah, so it is fascinating, right, in that sense, because it's very Venus Pluto
mhm,
on the Midheaven.
mhm.
And the way it reflects the natal chart, because I very much believe that like kind of just there's a reflection of the actual natal chart that goes on here, right? Where it's like you're not just interpreting any Venus Pluto MC line, you're interpreting it by the flavor of the fact that she has Venus and Pluto in the 11th house in her natal chart, right? That's kind of how I interpret things.
Yep.
And it is interesting, right? Because it is, being in the 11th house, dealing with networks and groups of people and parties. I can imagine she had so many different acquaintances from everywhere. And I think, if I remember correctly, she was kind of a party animal given everything. And I think she may have suffered from addictions as well. And I know she had a lot of,
Yeah, painkillers were like yeah, I
yes, yeah.
remember, reading about that and then watching some
Hmm.
documentaries, about that.
And
But
also, sexual partners of kind of
yes,
any kind. She was very promiscuous, right?
yes.
And her husband as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and so that, with those 11th, with Venus, Pluto in the 11th house, that kind of speaks to that. And then being in this location around New York, having Venus, Pluto angular, I imagine
I mean, is that
probably,
honestly, that just sounds like the good years. You know what I mean? Like a good
yeah,
time,
for
mid
sure.
20s,
Right, right.
early, still have a bit of your strength despite the
Hmm.
injuries.
For
Peak
sure,
artistic
for
influence. New
sure.
York is such a great
I
city. This tour through the US was only a couple of years.
Oh, okay. So I think it was other health issues. She had just health issues galore, so maybe
Oh,
that's why
yeah,
I'm just
she
getting
always had
confused.
urinary tract infections,
Mhm.
always pain in the lower spine. She was bedridden for much of
Right.
her life. But yeah, so when she was 26, she returns to Mexico.
Mhm.
And in 27, she is in Mexico City. That's when
Mhm.
she discovers Diego's affair with Christina. And then 3 years later,
And I'm
um,
sure that was kind of on display for the public, which is another kind of indication
yeah,
of that moon being on the
yeah,
MC,
that
like
that.
your emotional life just being out there for everyone to see. And then
Hmm.
looking at the delineation of the ruler being in the 11th house, then you move it to the first, and then everything all goes back to this 12th house. There's like a feedback here, right? Eventually,
Hmm.
because in the 12th house, ruler's in the 10th. But if you delineate it where that ruler is, the next ruler goes back to the 12th. So it's like this really, yeah, really just kind of sad story about the most difficult things that she had to go through being on display for the public. But then also the moon is exalted in Taurus, right? So
Hmm.
also she's got this beautiful art that she's sharing all of her pain with everybody.
Hmm.
So it's just like such a mixed bag, such
Right.
a mixed bag
Can you
of
give
things.
your like what you would do for your definition of the 12th house? What does it signify? What do you often see there? I mean, I know it's like hidden enemies, mental health, things that
Mhm.
are hidden from you, that sort of thing. But in particular, like with this chart, how would
I
you
mean,
signify it?
it's like traditionally it was a house of loss, right?
Yeah.
It's a house of loss. Health issues are typically related to the 12th and the 6th, right? Which she's got both going on. She's got the opposition between them, right? Um, Prisons, institutions, hospital, like solitude is another big one,
Hmm.
isolation. And I
Hmm.
think she did spend a lot of time alone, right? Like it was after kind of the recovery from the first accident or something that she began painting, so because she had all this time she was just laying around in bed alone. So
Hmm.
she started painting. And so solitude is a big 12th house theme as well.
Yeah.
Right. And there are like, you can kind of give it also positive indications where you're looking at your like meditation and those sorts of things that can show up in the 12th house. But typically the 12th house is considered a house of loss and difficult themes, right?
Yeah, and it being in Cancer, so the ruler of that is right there on the
Mhm.
10th. I mean, all that
On
suffering, all that
display.
isolation, it gets made public. I
Mhm.
don't want my public. That
And
would
it
be
was her
horrible.
career, it was
Yeah.
her life, it was her legacy, right? And
Hmm.
honestly, like, lately too, and a thing I've been thinking about with the 10th a lot lately and the MC is, like, how the word career, like, not everybody has a definable permanent career, right? The
Right.
MC is so much more about your legacy, right? Career, yes, maybe some people have that life where they have that like career, right? And then it is their legacy, right? But it's so much more about legacy than it
Hmm.
really is about like your job, right? Because your day job is the sixth house.
Right.
The
Yeah,
money that comes from the
day-to-day
day job is the
habits.
second house. Yeah.
But
But the
because it's
10th
at the
really,
top of the chart, it's sort of like this visibility issue, right? Not
right.
issue,
It's
but like,
what people remember you for. And
yeah.
that's what we remember her for, right?
Hmm.
The
Oh, that's
the
beautiful.
pain, absolutely, the pain, the suffering, and the beautiful artwork,
Public
right?
legacy versus like everyday work job.
Totally.
So
Yeah.
I think the
Mhm.
assumption is that if you have a career that could signify whether or not you go public, but the 10th house really discusses how you go public, right? Or,
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
long-term legacy. Yeah, no, that's
Totally.
beautiful. I love
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, it's kind of like, the words that will be spoken about you at
Yeah.
your funeral in a way, right? Like that's very, yeah. So,
Interesting
anyways.
too, because I feel like the
Mhm.
Frida Kahlo um is coming back up. We're seeing a
Mhm.
lot of feminine rising names surface, and I definitely see
Mhm.
Frida coming up there. And when we talk
Yes.
about posthumously, people's charts still living on beyond them, um,
Mhm.
I can see that that is definitely being touched upon.
Yeah, it is interesting. I'd be curious to know, like in Mexico, how it's going, right? Where that actual line is for her, right? If she's
Yeah.
there's, especially when it gets to that 29 aneretic degree, right? That like final hurrah, if there might be something going on with her, they might do
Yeah.
some kind of celebration of sorts or,
Well, I'll
yeah.
just move on really quickly while we
Yes,
walk through this because we have two other charts to look for. I just feel like the Moon MC for
hmm
her was really
for
like
sure.
so good example. But one,
Next.
she goes back to New York
Okay.
on her own at 32, Paris, Mexico-ish. She has exhibits in Paris, but then she divorces Rivera. At 33 in San Francisco, she remarries Diego Rivera. And then when she's 34 in Mexico City, her father, Guillermo Kahlo, passes away. Um,
And then I have to
just
close out
that's
this
got to
one.
be so devastating. And then
Right.
36, she begins teaching at La Esmeralda. At
Hmm.
37, she paints the broken column. At 43, she's hospitalized for nearly a year. Her entire life is paused. Her pain begins to intensify. At 46, her right leg is amputated. Um, and these are all stemming from
Hmm.
the complications from the accident that she had when she was 18.
Hmm.
And then at 46, her first solo exhibition is in Mexico while she's in her hospital bed.
Hmm.
And then July 13th, 1954, at 47 years old, um, she passes.
Hmm.
And and then there's a museum in 1958 that is created. The Casa Azul becomes a museum, and that inner life where she lived becomes very public. So again, that
Hmm.
posthumously shows up in her chart as well.
Hmm.
So you guys, that is Frida Kahlo and the Moon MC line. And that's what it can look like, in a natal chart when it rules your entire life, no matter where you go.
Hmm. Right. Right. That's the thing. It's so funny when clients are like, I've been on this line for forever. I'm tired of it. I'm ready to get away from it. But it's like the place where they were born. I was like, I've got news for you. You can't run away from this one.
Right.
This
You can
one, you gotta
influence.
embrace it and
Right.
figure it out. You gotta embrace it.
Yeah, a lot I mean,
And
you can activate
mhm,
parts of your chart and create emphasis in other areas that you want to work in, but your
mhm.
chart's your chart. It's going to follow you
For sure.
forever. You
And
don't
then
get
there's
away from
also
it.
right, and then there's also annual perfections, right? Where maybe some years those parts will be more activated than other years, right? They won't be as much of a story.
Mhm.
So there's that.
So, for an example of somebody who relocated to the Moon MC line, I found Albert Einstein, um,
Mm.
which was very
I
fascinating for
love
me.
this
Was
example. Yeah.
not expecting it. When you look at Frida's example, you can see how emotional it was, particularly she's a woman. You just her art, right? Like such a great example. But then you've got somebody like Albert who works in physics and math, and Einstein ended up moving to New Jersey. And here's something really interesting, you guys.
Hmm.
So the degree difference for Frida natally and for Albert Einstein was both exactly 6-degree orb.
Of what?
Just so you know, when the moon and the MC come together, for Frida
Hmm.
it was a 6-degree orb, and when Albert Einstein moved to New Jersey, that was also a 6-degree orb.
Oh,
I just found
interesting.
that
Yeah.
like was
Uh-huh.
really interesting. So, anyways, he was born
Something
in
with the degree.
Ulm, Württemberg, Germany,
Hmm.
and on March 4th,
11:30 a.m.
11:30 a.m. Yeah. So it's 11 degrees Cancer.
Hmm.
So Albert
Cancer
Einstein was
rising.
born
Yeah.
as a Cancer rising, 11 degrees ascendant.
So I'd say another relevant thing here is that he's ruled by the moon in his natal chart, right? And having that line be significant.
Ah, yes.
Yes, this is a thing too, I think. Yeah, for
Oh,
sure.
and look at that.
That's
Natally, look at that. I'm sorry. I hadn't seen
hmm
this in a while. The moon is sitting in the sixth house of
hmm
everyday work in Sagittarius, which is exalted in the
hmm
ninth house of higher knowledge, but also long distance travel.
Oh, the sun is exalted. It's yeah, the sun is in its house of uh
Hmm.
the house where it gets its joy in the ninth
Yeah.
house, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the sixth, the moon in Sagittarius, that is interesting, right? In the
I see
sense
things like
that
this and I go, well, there was really no choice. Like he was meant to move there.
he was meant to, yeah, move abroad. There's a Sagittarius story. There's an overseas, so a lot of times with Sagittarius stories, there's like overseas themes, right?
Hmm.
With Sagittarius.
Hmm.
And it is interesting, right? Because then that sixth house of daily work. So moving, going for work. Sun in the ninth. Yeah, exactly. People with the sun in the ninth house, immigrants or children of immigrants, there's always that story. I have that. It's very much, it's so common with the sun in the ninth. So yeah, it is interesting. And also just like it's a philosophical house, right?
Yes. Higher
It's a
knowledge,
philosophical
learning,
placement.
beliefs.
Like
Yeah.
totally. Then the ninth house was considered the house of God, right? It's where the ancients they had their seven planetary joy schemes, and certain
Yeah.
planets were said to be happiest when placed in certain houses. For the sun, that's the ninth. What I find so fascinating about that scheme is that it's actually so old that it's said to influence the significations of the houses themselves, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we hear the name Albert Einstein, of course, we think of genius, equations, time, space, bending of mind. But it didn't always begin he wasn't a prodigy, right? Like he was a quiet child. He was slow to speak. He was uncomfortable in the regular school systems. He was really curious.
He got
Um,
like C's in his math classes when he was little. That
yeah,
always gave me hope. I remember I actually did like a report on him when I was in like grade school. And that always like gave me hope. I remember when I like read that part of about him, I was like, "Oh, maybe there's hope for me even though I'm really awful at math right now."
yeah. It's not
Like,
anybody who has a natural talent, but those who are willing to do something about it.
yeah, yeah.
You know what I
It's
mean?
yeah.
So,
And
and
I'll
he was actually sick and confined to a bed at age 5.
mhm.
And this is kind of where his love of the unforeseen forces came from. His dad gave him a pocket compass while he was in bed,
Mhm.
and that was like something he was learning and playing with to pass the time. And So
Aw.
he talked about this later in life, and he says what astonished him was not the object itself, but that the fact that the needle moved and
Mhm.
consistently pointed to north. So there's these
Mhm.
invisible forces that
Horses.
were
Yeah.
touching upon it, and so it caught his imagination,
I love
and
that. Yeah.
he figured out the area to which to study, and it that
Okay.
was it for him. Um, as a teenager, Einstein rejected authoritarian education. At 16, this is great, he renounced his German citizenship and became stateless.
Uranus on the
Bit
IC right there in
of
that
a
third
rebel.
house. In the third house too. And education also like that early formative educational years with that Uranus there on the IC rebelling against your homeland, literally your homeland. It is interesting, right? Because that's like the IC point is there. So that story, that local
Yeah, the local
the
area.
place where he's from, he renounced his German ship. But it was around the time of the Nazis, correct? That
Um, let's see,
was that when he renounced
he
it
was
or
16, so 1895, that's when that was. So that wasn't,
okay, yeah, no, that was earlier,
yeah.
but it is interesting because that's when he decided to renounce his German citizenship
Yep.
at that point.
Yeah. So,
And it's fascinating because I'm like I'm curious why. Clearly then he didn't feel at home. He was Jewish, right?
yep.
I know that much.
Hmm.
So I wonder the level of persecution that was already at play
Yeah.
against him. I can only imagine
Well,
because
and
that's
Uranus is
probably
like
what it was. Hmm.
sudden insights,
Totally.
and he probably got the insight like this is not, I can see where this is going. I'm done with it. I mean, there could have been other
Hmm.
things going on, but yeah, that it feels like it could have been part of the story.
Totally. Hmm.
He eventually found his way to Switzerland where he studied physics and
Hmm.
mathematics, and he struggled to fit in to those or expectations
Right.
there.
I just wanted to see his param
Switzerland.
lines in Switzerland, right?
Yeah.
Let
Let's
me
take a look
see.
at
He's
that.
got like a Mars Saturn, so that's interesting. That's a grind.
And in
I'm telling you.
1905, while working quietly at the Swiss
Hmm.
Patent Office in Bern, Einstein
Hmm.
published a series of papers that transformed science forever. So, yeah, let's see. So,
Saturn on the Midheaven. So this Paran line comes from Mars on the descendant, so with other people, and then Saturn on the midheaven, right? That's the crossing that creates this particular Mars Saturn Paran line, which is interesting because the career, right, is at play. And like this is like really intense, like hard working energy. So I imagine he put in long, long hours.
And in 1909, Zurich leaves patent office, becomes a professor. Then he goes to Prague and
Hmm.
becomes a professor at a German university.
So Prague is
Yeah.
his moon MC line. He's closer to that moon MC line in there. Just noticing that's interesting. Also, he's got a moon nodal line.
Moon
Talking about the
MC?
moon,
Oh, I see. A
Sun
Paran line. I see.
MC,
I see. Okay.
Sun MC, astrocartography line, and
Okay.
then
Yeah.
moon nodal, Paran line, which is it's interesting. The moon and the nodes together really kind of
Yeah.
indicate meant to be themes around
Hmm.
moon themes, right? Around either
Yeah.
women, mothers, nurturing, or in his case, possibly I would say work, because for him the moon is in the sixth house, right?
Right.
So, anyways,
In 1933, that he
hmm
moved from Germany to the US, fleeing Nazi
hmm
Germany. Jewish
hmm
identity becomes this politically dangerous theme for him at this
uh-huh,
stage. He was 54 years old,
right,
but
right.
he was able to join Princeton and the Institute for Advanced Study, essentially
Hmm
being an intellectual refugee, something we are
hmm
starting to see again
Yeah,
right
the
now.
echoes are a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When he
Yeah.
was 57 in 1936, living in Princeton, New Jersey,
Mhm.
Elsa Einstein passes,
His wife at
his
that
wife.
point.
Age 60, he signs a letter urging atomic research. 61, he becomes a US citizen.
Mhm.
66 is when the atomic bomb dropped.
He did not support from what I
Right.
remember. Yeah.
No.
It's also his sun ascendant line. So with this kind of a combination with the moon on the MC and the sun on the ascendant, it's no surprise that here he really stepped into his natal promise and
Mhm.
his life's work and all of that
Yeah.
and what he was known for. Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
And that moon on the midheaven, I mean, and it is interesting in the sense that like the theories and the things that he dealt with were so moon-like in a way, and especially with it being in Sagittarius. Sagittarius deals with like things like philosophy and physics. I feel like falls under that category of like the
Yeah.
unknown type of
The unknown. Yeah.
life's
The
mysteries and those
unseen.
kinds of things. So it's
Yeah.
very moon and Sagittarius also flavor to it. And then yeah, it's very changing, right? Like what do we really know about physics? Like all of these like the matter, the molecules, the things, the theories, right? The theory of relativity, right? It's very ever kind of changing like the moon, but then it's also very Sagittarius because of its higher knowledge too. Sagittarius is all the higher knowledge also, so
I
it
know
makes
physics,
sense. Yeah.
particularly right now, it seems like
Hmm
the conversation around quantum physics and its
hmm
interconnectedness with spirituality, and then touching upon that.
Totally.
Again, this cycle returning right now
hmm
is foretold by astrology is not surprising.
Totally. And look, he's in his Saturn. Yeah, totally. He's in his Saturn return. Look at that. Posthumously,
Hobos
right?
posthumously, Saturn return. Yeah, that
Yeah,
Aries.
yeah.
Yeah, again,
I
another
mean,
example of
you're
how
not
your
gonna
chart
know.
can live on, particularly if you've been
Totally.
famous
We
to
might
now.
hear about, and it's since it's up here and it's angular for him in the 10th house, we might hear something come up for him that's physics related during this Saturn and Aries transit. And what's also interesting, I think, is that Jupiter is going to be on his sun around the same time as he's having that Saturn return posthumously. So it could even be some kind of like biographical article or book or something like that, right?
Yeah, maybe like a movie
Who knows?
or
Oh, yeah, that would be
just
interesting.
trending things.
Hmm
Yeah.
Something along those lines are
Our
perfect.
next example is Yoko Ono. Yoko Ono was born in Tokyo, Japan on February 18th of 1933. Her birth time is around 8:30 p.m. in the evening. They say it's excellent, but of course, Jen and I
Um,
don't like it when it's an even Steven.
I know, right? First of all, her chart I think is super interesting. Did you know, she actually consulted with astrologers and divination, and she would actually schedule her appointments for when the moon was in the void of course moon, because they were trying to screw her, like the producers and different people, all the hawks around her were trying to screw her out of whatever she could get out of John's, legacy and music and
I love
financially
that.
and all of that. Yeah, and she would schedule the meetings with them to do what they wanted to do under avoided course moon so that it would not come to
It wouldn't work
fruition.
out. Yeah. I
But she
love
was
that.
very much into this, and she did have like an astrologer, and she totally had. And
Aw,
anyways, I could definitely like
Libra
her
rising.
Frida.
We love that.
Yeah, I could talk about her chart for
Let's do
sure.
it.
She's that MC in
Oh,
the first
yeah.
decan of
Cancer.
Cancer that shows that that first decan of Cancer is a lot about relationships. And
Hmm.
so she's known for her relationship, right? Like her public persona, everything that has to do with it has to do with that, right?
Yeah.
With her relationship with John Lennon. And then it is also interesting, obviously, that Venus Saturn conjunction in a night
Hmm.
chart is something, in the fifth house, right? Where it's like entertainment, creativity, all of those things, right? He was a musician, and it's like her love with him, right? Where it's like it's in a night chart, so Saturn's difficult, right? So it's there
Hmm.
with Venus, but then there's still Venus is the better planet, Saturn is not, and so there's this like story of
Well,
like,
and Venus is leading, it's in front. So it's kind of like it
yeah,
doesn't hold it back as much. But again, anything
mhm,
developed under Saturn tends to stay and be a foundation.
yeah,
So,
yeah, and
um,
It's in Aquarius, so Saturn obviously it's in rulership there, so
mhm.
it's well off. But it's like also telling that story of that loss of
Yeah.
love, right? That loss of
Hmm.
love.
Yeah.
Um, and then that 12th house, of course, the difficulty, that's she's got things going on in the 12th house. And as we mentioned, it's not, and it is a house of loss, right?
Hmm.
So that's there.
She was born in Tokyo in 1933 to a wealthy and cultured family. Her early life was shaped by displacement and spending parts of her childhood between Japan and New York during the upheaval of World War II, which instilled in her a sensitivity to both place and experience. And after returning to Japan post war and completing her education, she moved permanently to New York City in 1960, where she relocated to her Moon MC line and kind of came alive, allowing the city to serve as the crucible where her inner emotional world aligned with the public expression. In New York, she immersed herself in the avant garde and Fluxus movements, staging experimental art performances, collaborating with other artists, and eventually meeting John Lennon, whose partnership amplified her visibility. From the iconic bed-ins for peace to her ongoing exhibitions, music, and activism, the New York became both the home of her heart and the stage for her life's work, a place where her emotional depth, creativity, and world changing vision converged, making her personal experiences inseparable from her public legacy.
And yeah, so her moon is in the third house where it gets its joy. The moon gets its joy in the third house. And once again, we're dealing with another Sagittarius moon, which is interesting, right? Because we're considering that international flavor being taken into account, right? With the moon in Sagittarius.
I'm seeing
And
themes.
mhm, and yeah, that Venus Saturn conjunction in the fifth, that's her ascendant ruler. And it is interesting too, because that's set up the course of her love relationship, set up the course of her whole like yeah, her whole life and everything. So anyways, yeah, that her MC, and this is another thing where where I was talking about before, where you see how the relocated chart will many times mirror the natal chart in really interesting ways. The ruler of her natal MC, right, is her moon. Right. And so the moon MC line being very significant to her is interesting, right, in her life because it mirrors her chart in a sort of way, in the sense that she has an MC that is moon ruled, right?
Yep.
So this is where it gets to be like so like specific and nuanced to what the chart is, right?
Yeah.
For that person, what's going on in that chart.
Yeah, let's take a look at because
Mhm.
when she moved to New York and she'd been back and forth between Japan and New York from like essentially the age of 6 onward. It was
Right.
she like kept going back and forth, and then when she was 27, she moved there permanently. So,
Mhm.
um when we talk about relocating people or moving, it's often it's kind of weird. You see this again and again. It's baked into the chart. You can see
Yeah.
where people are pulled and attracted to again and again until they just finally make the jump.
Now, another thing I think that's kind of interesting is that the MC point is in the 11th house here, right? Like friendships, groups, organizations. And John
Yeah,
Lennon was in a band, right? Like
yeah,
there were a lot of people around. There were a lot of parties going on, right? So it's not just a
Her
moon
social
MC,
networks, her social groups,
totally
her
social
friendships.
networks.
Yeah.
It's a moon MC in the 11th.
Yeah.
Another thing, she's also on her sun ascendant line here. So as we
Again.
saw also with Albert,
Yeah.
right, where it's like there's that story at plays sun and Venus ascendant line, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the Venus ascendant line is really nice for her because she does have a night chart,
Yep.
right? But then also she's got Saturn nearby, right? So it's like seeing that multi-layered story where it's like the best
Yeah.
of the best and the worst of the worst in a
Yeah.
place and in her life and in her story because of the loss that she experienced with her husband, but then also everything that she gained from that,
Mm-hmm.
everything she gained from that relationship. But also the pain that she suffered through it was on display, right?
Yep.
With the moon on the MC.
Yeah.
All of the emotional trauma that she had to go through was on display for everybody. And then
Mm-hmm.
for everybody to add in their thoughts, points, opinions, viewpoints, whatever on her, and if she broke up the band or whatever it was, blah blah blah. Um, and so it was both a very difficult story and then also it was her fate, but it is interesting she has the moon with Saturn running directly through New York City, which is another
The
interesting layer to the
Paran.
story. Yeah, that Paran
Yeah.
line. Um, Mars Saturn, that moon Saturn
Yeah. The moon
story,
in
right?
Cancer, Venus next to Saturn, and then she lives on a moon Saturn Paran.
No, and that moon Saturn story being, and she was a mother too, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's moon, this is with the moon on the descendant, so that's about relationships, partnerships, other
Mm-hmm.
people. It's with Saturn on the midhaven, so that's about her career and her legacy,
Mm-hmm.
outstanding and long living with it being in Saturn. And yeah, she was a mother. She had to raise her child without their father,
Mm-hmm.
after John Lennon was killed, right? So
Yeah.
there's that whole story that she was on display in that way as well too. And the moon, as we know, is connected to the mother. So it was.
So she had
Mhm,
one child, Kyoko Shun Cox, from a
mhm,
marriage from Anthony Cox, and born in '63,
mhm.
who was abducted by the father, by the way, for a
Oh
period
my god, I didn't know about
during
any of
his
this. This was
custody
before she
dispute.
met
Yeah,
John
deeply
then. Oh
affected
my
Yoko.
gosh.
And
Oh my
then
gosh.
Sean Lennon was born in
Okay.
1975. He's a
Also a
musician and a
musician.
producer.
Mhm.
Yep, and definitely the center of her
1975. So
life.
he was pretty
Yeah,
young. He was pretty young. So she
yeah,
had to suffer through that loss as
oh,
well. Something that you can't even
yeah.
wrap your mind around for as a mother to,
63. Oh.
they lose you have to raise a child who loses their father and in such
Mm-hmm.
a public way, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
everyone knew about it. It was
Yeah,
like it was
I
a
just can't
moment that really
imagine.
defined the 80s too,
Right.
right? It
Yeah.
defined it was also the in a way the end of an era,
Oh yeah.
because
No,
the Beatles defined the 60s and 70s and then he was
there
gone,
was
right? It's
that
it's
cut. There
very
was a before and then there was
totally.
an after and then yeah,
Mhm,
that was it.
totally.
Yeah, they met when she was 33 years old. Then like when she was 36, they had the bed in for peace.
Mhm,
And then when she was 47, that's when then he was assassinated. So
right. When she was 37,
47.
47?
47
She was
also, just so you all know, is the
she
12th
was a
house
little older.
perfection year.
Uh-huh, and look, she's got the Mars conjunct Jupiter thing going on too.
Hmm.
It's very violent, and then with Neptune there, which is interesting because this guy was like a whack job,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
He like,
Yeah.
yeah, it was like a random, like a really random bizarre event, like no one
Um,
expected it.
no, yeah, it
Um,
was out of
yeah,
nowhere. I think it happened outside of the Dakota. What
yeah, outside of some hotel. Did you ever hear that quote? Allegedly, and I don't know how true this is, but supposedly someone once asked John Lennon how they think he would like what he would do when he got older. He said something along the lines of like, "Oh, I'll probably get whacked off by some loony or something. I
Yeah,
probably won't make it." And then he
he
really did.
knew.
I don't know if that's true or not. It's so off topic
No, I
too,
think you're right.
but
I
I
think
think
he did say that.
right.
The man who killed John Lennon was
Hmm.
Mark David Chapman. He was shot on December 8th in 1980 outside the Dakota apartment buildings. I got that right.
Hmm.
Lennon was pronounced dead later. Chapman was arrested on the scene, later pleading guilty, sentenced to 20 years of life. He was denied parole multiple times and to this day remains incarcerated. All right. So that is our moon MC line. Um, When we place Frida Kahlo and Albert Einstein side by side, we're not comparing talented or impact, we're composing how inner life becomes visible. Both
Mhm.
Frida and Einstein lived lives where something deeply internal reshaped the public world, and yet did so through entirely different languages. When the inner world rises to the top of the chart or onto the world stage, it no longer belongs solely to the individual. It becomes collective property, it becomes projection, and it becomes legacy. Some people lead with the heart and some people lead with the mind, but both are asked the same questions. What happens when what is most private to you becomes what you are known for? And perhaps the answer is you don't get to control how the world perceives it, only whether you are brave enough to offer it at all.
Bravo.
All right.
Bravo. Bravissima. All right, love that. Okay.
Thanks, Jen.
So
We'll
thank
see you next
you,
time.
Tia. Yep, next time. Bye.
Bye.